Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Kind Regards podcast, hosted by yours truly, Zamiwe Mwape. In this episode, we're continuing our discussion with Jane Mazimba as we dive into the practicalities of getting out of debt. Well, if you're thinking, Zamiwe, when it comes to personal finance and debt, I've read the books and got the t-shirt. Linda, listen, it's one thing to read about these things in an abstract way, but it's another to hear it from someone who's actually done it themselves and is willing to share the story of how they did it. We also discussed Jane's book, Catching Fire, and the inspiration behind it, and why she structured it as a 52-week journey. You won't want to miss it. Without further ado, let's jump back into the conversation. What practical advice would you give someone trying to dig themselves out of a debt hole?
Yeah. And you know what? I don't know if you see me like looking on the side here. I was just trying to pull up this data from the CDC. And because we're talking about debts, I remember the statistic in my head. So globally, men are making up around, I'm about to become a little bit of a nerd. Just 1 second. So globally make up about 49, almost 50% of the global population, right? But when you look at the suicide rates, 80% are men, right? And when you look at this, I was trying to pull up the study. When you look at this, of that 80%, almost 70% of those people cite financial distress as a big catalyst to them wanting to unalive themselves. Financial distress. So debt is a big thing. So I feel like the first thing, I don't know if this is as practical as you were thinking when you asked this question, the very first thing to remember underneath all the shame, because it's mostly shame, underneath all the shame and all the embarrassment is to remember that there's always a way out. And removing yourself from this earth is not the way out. But there's always a way out. There's always a plan. When you finally get to a place where you own your mistakes and you're open and honest, there's people around us who can help. And I truly believe in that saying that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Like, so true. We say it spiritually or whatever, philosophically, but scientifically, there's actually a reason for that. When you set a goal and say, you know what, I'm going to get out of debt, your RAS gets activated, your reticular activating system gets activated because you set that goal. Worse off if you write down the goals, write down the numbers and say, this is my debt repayment plan. This is what I'm going to do. Your brain starts to zero in on opportunities that will allow you to either pay off the debt or make money so you can pay off the debt quicker. It's like a scientific fact. So spiritually, it's there. Like the mouth speaks for us in our hearts, right? When the student is ready, the teacher appears, all those things. Your RAS is working. So you can either explain it spiritually or you can explain it scientifically, but there's always a way out. So one is just to know that this is the worst it can be and everybody makes mistakes. Nobody taught us how to handle money. Most of us, nobody taught us. You're just doing the best that you can. But secondly, is now making the decision and saying, I'm gonna get out of this. How do you make that decision? Yeah, mentally make the decision, but then start taking practical steps. What are the steps? List down the debt. I can't tell you how many times I've had clients sit down with me and say, I'm highly indebted, I'm stressed. How much do you owe? So I got a loan. Okay, how much was the loan? The loan was 200,000, but you got the loan 3 years ago. How's the loan now? What is it looking like? We haven't looked. Know that I borrowed from so and so. I borrowed from the microfinance. I've been servicing it for 7 months. So what's the balance? They don't know. So next step, which is step number 3, is list down all your debts. List down all your debts. If there's interest being accumulated or accrued, list down the interest against that debt and list down the repayment dates. Okay? When do you need to repay this debt by? If there's no interest, it's fine. But when did you promise Zamiwe to pay back her 2,000 kwachas, right? And then from there, you start working. There are several methods. Obviously, there's the avalanche method that everybody talks about. So you pay off the one with the highest interest first, because then that accumulates quicker, right? But even as you are targeting 1 or 2 to pay off first, have conversations with the people you're owing to let them know that your payment might be delayed. If you're lucky enough to have your debt with a structured financial institution like a bank or a microfinance, you can actually go and restructure your loan. You've had a 5-year loan, you've paid 3 years or 2 years or whatever it is. They take out a sheer chunk of your money. You can go to the bank and say, can you stretch it back up to 5 years, but reduce the amount that I pay so that you give yourself some wiggle room? Those are easy conversations. But if it's informal, like you and I've borrowed money, it pays to just come and say, you know what, sis, friend, ma'am, whatever it is, I can't afford to pay you the whole amount now, but I can afford to break down the 2,000 kwacha into 4 payments of 500 kwacha. I will pay you every 2 weeks. Please bear with me. Yes, you might be angry, you might shout. For the most part, most people are understanding when they know there's a plan. There are some who are unreasonable, they'll shout, but it's their money. Just swallow it. You've inconvenienced them. Swallow it, but stick to the plan. Yeah. You swallow it, you swallow the shouting for 5 minutes, and you tell them, okay, cool, I understand how you feel, but this is what I can afford at the moment. So I will send, and you stick to your commitment. I think I've said so many steps now. It might be step number 6. You stick to the payment plan. And when you have extra, you pay extra so that you pay off quicker. Another thing with debt, especially with, again, structured, registered financial institutions, is usually when you get a bank loan or a microfinance loan, the first few payments go to paying off your interest. The chunk of your repayment, if you look at the statement breakdown, goes to paying off your interest. So if you have extra and you pay that extra to the bank, that extra will be applied to your principal. So when you're paying the amount monthly, it might look like the repayment amount is not reducing, but when you look at the principal will be reducing. That means you'll pay it off quicker than you were intending to pay initially. So when you have extra and it's consumer debt, then you always pay off as much more on top as you can to reduce your repayment period. Like I said, when I started off, I had 5 years. I paid off everything I was owing in 22 months, everything. So it's doable. I bought myself 3 years. I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, that's a lot of time and that's a lot of money. I like that you kicked off with the mental health perspective. And I think it's such a broad discussion that maybe we can't even cover in full here. The fact that men make up 80% of suicide rates and 70% of those are related to finances. I think it also then speaks into the conversation, the 50-50 conversation, because men do carry so much pressure, so much shame. And I just want to reiterate what Jane said, which is that if you're out there and you are struggling financially and you're considering unaliving yourself, please don't feel like there's all hope is lost. Even if you don't have someone in your life you can talk to, maybe find someone at church. But yeah, I think that's a very, very important discussion, and it goes into a whole lot of other things. It has tentacles, men are providers. We're saying, a man must provide, a man must do that. But economic times have also changed, and it's important for us to respond to our unique circumstances. If you can't afford to be the 100% provider of your home, just come out and be honest about it. And as women, maybe let's be a bit more open-minded and just see how we can actually work together, because that's a big deal. And another thing that I like that you've mentioned is it almost sounds unbelievable that someone would be owing money but not know how much they owe. But that's the truth of it. And you can't fix what you don't know, right? So yeah, you've given us all these steps. But one thing I picked out when you were describing your journey at the beginning of our conversation is that you also made extra efforts to earn more. And it was more at work. You mentioned having a side business. Could you speak to that? Or what kind of side business were you doing? Because I think sometimes people are like, I don't have a business idea. I don't even know where to start. How would you advise someone regarding going around that, especially low income earners?
I think extra income is such a big deal. It's a big aspect of you meeting your financial goals, not just paying down debt, but also building your investments, also living the life that you want. If you budget and pinch your pennies, you can only reduce your budget so far. If I get paid 10K in kwachas and my house rent is, let's say, 3,000 kwacha, my house rent will remain 3,000 kwacha. Even if I remove cheese from my budget, I remove DSTV from my budget, the rent will always be 3. So I can only save up to so much, right? But if I look at the other side of the equation to increase my income, there's no limit to how much you can earn. It's up to you and your time, right? So I have always had a side hustle. I don't even know how to explain. I've always had a side hustle, and only one business that I have now have I had to extend capital in terms of money. All the businesses that I've had have always been to do with my talents. So when I was getting out of debt, the first thing that I was doing was working overtime, right? No capital needed. It's just my ear on the ground. There's a project going on. They need people to come in on Saturday and then Sunday to help get this thing delivered on time. Jace is coming. And for those of us who worked in corporate, you know that Sunday is double overtime. Okay?
Yep.
From me, Sundays, they pay you double your worth because it's such, or public holidays and Sundays, double overtime. Saturday is 1.5. So I was there. I was volunteering for everything. The other thing is I had a business doing head wraps. Again, that's just talent. I just knew how to tie gele. From my past shenanigans, I learned how to tie gele. And when I was back in Zambia and I was living here full time, there would be a kitchen party and somebody say, "Oh, can Jane come and tie a head wrap for me?" They would say, "Oh, yo, I'll put gas in your car, drive down and do my gele. I'll do my auntie's gele." And her friends would be like, "Can you do mine as well?" And the nice African aunties, they'll always give you an extra 100 kwacha or 50 kwacha or something to appreciate you. So I always had that in my back pocket. When I was financially in trouble, I just ramped it up. I just made it a business. So what I would do is during the week, I would have photos of like head wraps on myself or on clients. This is how I started. In fact, I think it was photos of myself. I paid somebody 300 kwacha to do a photo shoot. I did head wraps and I started a page and I did head wraps and I posted on my page and say, "I do head wraps for your special occasions or whatever, or for casual chills if you want an African flair." And then from that, I just started marketing. Closed mouths don't get fed. I literally just marketed the bejesus out of that. I learned how to use Facebook ads. Then it was heavily Facebook. Every weekend, I made sure that I had at least 3 to 5 bookings every weekend. I would start as early as, I would leave my house as early as 4 in the morning because you know some of these bridal events, if they're starting at 9, the bride has to start getting ready by 6. So if I'm driving a distance, I'll be up 4, 5, driving somebody's house. I do the bride, I do the whole bridal party. They pay me. I take photos. I go to the next. They pay me. I take photos. Like that, my whole weekend would be running around doing that. And then come Monday, when I'm at the office, I'll just schedule posts. So they would go up. "Oh, this is what we did last weekend. If you want to look this good, hit me up. This is the number. This is how you make a booking." And I am like amazed to say that business actually used to make me more than I used to make on my salary.
Wow.
Yeah, I made more money from my side hustle, working weekends, than I used to make from my salary. And also there's a tax aspect here. Whatever you get paid, I know your audience is broad, so I'll keep it to the Zambian context and we can apply it depending on where you are. But in Zambia, pay as you earn is around 37.5. Well, it's 37% now. I think they reduced the 0.5. It's 37%. If you work in an institution and you get a salary. When I have a small business, I'm paying 15%. That's my turnover tax. So already, if my business has made me the same amount that I make at the office, just by the tax bill itself, my business has made me more in terms of actual money in my pocket, right? So that's something that I learned along the way. So I started with my hands and a little bit of data on my phone so I could market on the internet and it picked up. That's one business that I did. And then I started speaking about my journey. I started talking about this journey that I was taking to pay off debt, to start building wealth and the things that I was learning. And you find that from that, a speaking business was born. And I didn't even realize it was a speaking business. But people would call me and they would say, "Oh, we have a 2,000 kwacha. Can you come and speak to this group of ladies? Can you do a workshop for us?" And for years, I did that without actually realizing that I was running a business until I got some mentorship. And my mentor then is the CEO of HLB in India and Southeast Asia. He was my mentor for the year. He helped me put structures into my business. So this is actually a business. How do you position yourself? You're a speaker now. How do you position yourself? How do you get clients? How do you pitch corporates? And then after that, how do you set up your accounts, your customer relationship management, all that stuff? I set it up and now it's a business. Again, that's something that I started with very little to minimal capital. I was just sharing online. I already had data. I was going to use the data either way, and I still use that. So these are different things. What I'm saying is you use your talents and you use your expertise. All of us, especially if you have some sort of occupation, you're an expert in your field. And there's somebody who wants to know what you can do or who wants your service. And so you leverage that. You're a teacher. Guess what? There's some kids who need some holiday, something. They're struggling in a subject, or they want to learn how to speak Nyanja because they're diaspora kids. They haven't learned how to speak. That's a money opportunity. You're a guy who's good at software. There's a Jane somewhere who can get her speaker to work on Riverside. Like, there's always... I'm just saying, we are all experts and there's always a market. And especially with the online space, people assume you have to have 10,000 followers, 100,000 followers to make a living in your expertise. No, I get booked not from my likes. It's the people who don't like. It's the people who just view and pass, who come back to me and say, oh, we'd like you to do this. All expenses paid, come down to our country so you can conduct this workshop for us. It's because we saw a post of you on LinkedIn or somebody was passing by and they didn't engage. So put yourself out there, make yourself findable and tell people, again, closed mouths don't get fed. Tell people what you do so that people can know to pick up your service and can recommend you to other people. So earn more. Yeah.
I love that. So 2 things that I'm taking away. Number 1, basically, you have to work. There are no free lunches. And if you're trying to dig yourself out, you have to work and you have to work hard. And sometimes the benefits of you putting in that work aren't just going to be the money. That's what I'm hearing, because I think, like you said, if you're putting up your hand at work for extra jobs, you're adding value in different ways to earn more. I feel like that also builds up your social capital in the workspace, and you will probably be one of the first people they have in mind for other exciting opportunities. So it might even help grow your career in that way. There's an opportunity there. And secondly, like you said, just working and doing your thing and sharing and putting yourself out there. It's not going to be a direct like is equal to 1 kwacha, but it opens you up to so much more. And basically, we shouldn't be shy to say what we're doing, right? That's what I'm hearing from you, Jane.
Yeah, I want to throw in here something you pointed out, that when you put your hand up, you get seen. And I think in the book, I talked about this concept of opportunity luck, where because you're doing something in one area, you're working really hard, you're over applying yourself in one area, other areas start to benefit as well. I was working hard to get out of debt at work. And during the time that I was working hard to get out of debt, I got 3 promotions exactly for the reason that you've talked about. Because I was always there working on projects. I probably knew more than anybody else, even on projects that didn't affect my department. I was seen as dedicated. I was delivering. And so there were opportunities for me to grow. 2 of those promotions came in the same year. I was double promoted in 1 letter. I jumped 2 grades because I was applying myself. Yes, I was a great worker, but that's not what I set off to do. I set off to pay off debt, and that debt built this opportunity lap for me where I was thriving in different areas. So yeah, exactly. I think something we need to actively tap into.
And you've mentioned your book, so I feel like that's the perfect opportunity for us to talk about Catching Fire. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. It's structured in a way that's different from a lot of the personal finance books that I have read, in that you structured it according to the 52 weeks of the calendar. It is an interactive book. So the world is filled with a number of books, on this topic. One might even say the personal finance space is saturated. Why did you feel that the world needed your book, Catching Fire?
I didn't realize it was saturated until just now.
I mean, there are a lot of personal finance books, not in Zambia, baby, but there are a lot of personal finance books, no? Is it just me?
No, I guess they are, but I think it just never occurred to me. I guess that's the power of delusion. The Lulu is the Salulu. it never occurred to me that my book wouldn't have a place. Because when I was going through this transition of trying to learn about money, I was a banker for 5 years when I got into debt and when I started this journey, by the way. So I worked in the finance space already, but I didn't know the science of money. And so once I got onto this journey, I was finding all these amazing people. I found Ramit Sethi, I found Dave Ramsey, I found Jay Shetty. Jay Shetty is not personal finance, but definitely like holistic, right? I found all these amazing people who were talking about money and writing about money, but none of it was contextual to me. Dave Ramsey was telling me that I must never put my money in bonds, or was discouraging a big portfolio in bonds because bonds don't do well. They do 1%, 2%, but that's for the US market. In Zambia, bonds then were hitting the 30s. The yield on a government bond when I went on this journey was, I think the highest yielding bond that I have is 36%. My government was looking for money, so bonds were doing very well. So I had to use the wisdom of taking the principle and applying it to my setup. So the gap that I saw was there wasn't African voices. Obviously, I read Smart Money Woman, love Arise Ugu, but again, it was very much for a bigger economy, very much Nigeria and West Africa. And Zambian stock market only has 32 companies. For you to actually see movement on your share price, you have to keep quiet for a good 1 year to 18 months before you see a substantial jump. Our companies pay a lot more dividend, for instance, right? So it was that thing where I was like, okay, if I wrote a book, what would I want to see? And so I wrote it from an African perspective. I wrote it from a Zambian perspective. I feel like all these other people have done great work, but they've also written it for their market, for a specific audience. So we like the principles, but how does that principle look like for Zambia, for Malawi, for Zimbabwe? How does this principle apply for South Africa? And that's the gap that I saw. And to me, there was no one. I'm happy to say that that's changed. I'll be speaking at an event with Nicolette Mashire.
Oh, yes, I saw that.
On the 31st of August. So she wrote a book, What's Your Move? That's a personal finance book. Great work. There's this lady, Mapalo Maku. You're not broke, you're pre-rich. Again, that's a personal finance book. Arise also dropped her Smart Money Tribe, the second book in her series. So there's more information now. But when I was starting the journey, there was very little knowledge with the African context to it. Most of the work that we were reading, the saturation that I'm hearing you talk about, was by Western books.
And you know what? I actually take that back, that comment about it being saturated. And I think maybe that question came that way to mind because over the past couple of years, I've really been into personal finance. So I've read so much about it. And everyone that you have mentioned, I have pretty much either read their book or I have watched their videos. Nicolette, I haven't yet read her book, but I've watched her stuff. Mapalomaku, again, I've been consuming so much content. So maybe that's why in my mind, I was like, there's so much content out there. And yes, you're right. I actually have not seen any other personal finance book from the Zambian context. So the space is definitely not saturated. Do you know any others that you'd want to share?
I know several creators, not so much authors, who have written a whole book, but like in Zambia itself, I think you've had Chanozia, yes. In my head, I was thinking Miss Kawai.
Miss Kawai.
Instagram name.
Yes.
In Zambia alone, Chanozia does great. Her analysis, especially around investing government bonds, chef's kiss. There's a guy called Mr. Mbandu. His specialty is on the stock markets, the Zambian stock market. Love how he breaks down those shares, dividend payouts. Munyomba Mutwale. Munyomba does like economic analysis and breaks it down. Like today, he sent out this bulletin about like the gold hitting Chakuti $5,000, Chakuti, and how like he brings it back to me and how that affects me. So he takes the global economy and then breaks it down for my personal views. What's his name? Oh my God. Now that you put me on the spot, their names are going. And I know these guys, Chipepo.
Finances with Chipepo.
Yes, I would categorize Chipepo more as like general finances, your general budgeting, the general investing. She hasn't yet niched so much, but she's amazing. Chansa Arumunde, oh my God, she's great as well. She's also more holistic with finances, but I saw her do a travel blog from the financial perspective. Like, what sort of budget do you need? How do you plan for a trip? Again, she's amazing. Liapa Mbewe. Liapa is the first of us who has actually turned financial literacy into a formalized wealth consultancy space. So she's built a company called Money Acumen. That's amazing. Mwaba Mupinde. She's also like more holistic, more like, I guess it's also our profession. Sometimes they don't allow us to go and do an analysis on a particular stock.
Yeah, because she's in financial services.
Yeah, she's in financial services. So she talks broadly around just habits and things with your finances. So those are the Zambians that I can think of.
But no other book.
Not yet. Another one is coming from me.
Oh, I love it. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm working on my second project.
That's great. I can't wait to see it. What inspired you to structure Catching Fire the way you did? It's in the calendar format. It's got provisions for notes, tasks, etc. What was the driver behind that?
So I'm a Christian and I get distracted so much. There's so many James talking to me inside this head. So I've never really been that Christian who can just pick up the Bible and like open and start my Bible study that way. I've always benefited from guided study. And so when I was thinking about writing the book and I'd read all these other people like you're talking about, I thought about like, how would I want to learn? So I was imagining myself, like imagining if I had a big sister holding my hand and telling me like, okay, this is what you do first. Okay, after you have finished doing this, this is the next thing that you do. And then after you finish this next thing, this is the next thing you do. Because sometimes I feel like we give broad strokes of advice. We say, oh, set some goals. We take it for granted that everybody knows how to set a goal. But what's the actual science? If I sit down and I say, today I want to set some goals, what should I be thinking about? What questions should I be asking myself? If I'm going to put it down on paper, what should it look like? Hence, you have the what are we doing? So I explain the what of it, and then I explain the benefit of it, and then I show a practical way of you doing it, hence the templates and the note sections and things like that, with the hope that it will propel somebody to actually do the exercise and not just read it as head knowledge and move on to the next book.
I honestly found that very value adding. And I'm going to fangirl a little bit about your book. So if you are someone who is looking to work on your finances and yourself, I would highly recommend this book. Aside from the fact that it's structured the way we have discussed, the chapters are really short and digestible. I know our attention spans are not at their best with social media and all these distractions that we have, but the fact that the chapters are short and digestible and you have a week to implement whatever that chapter requires of you, by the end of the year, you won't be the same person because every week will probably feel like a victory lap because you would have achieved something and you tick something off. So I would highly recommend your book. So thank you for putting out this body of work. It's digestible and it's relatable.
Thank you so much.
One last question I have for you is, if you could only pick one chapter from your book that a person must read, which one would it be? Gun to your head.
It would be the first week, the dream a little or a lot. I think that it all starts from there. Usually when you're in a situation, or even if you're not in a situation, but you're just coasting, you're just living, right? We don't build intentionality. You don't see that it's a big world out there. You don't see that there's so much that can be done. So that dreaming, that is so important. So the encouragement is to dream with your eyes wide open. Think about what your life could actually be. And once you dream, like 10x that dream. Like the thing you think is not possible, or the thing that you think is at the very, tip of, oh my God, could this happen? Then times 10. Because as a Christian or whatever spiritual path that you follow, my Bible tells me that he's able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that which we can ask or even imagine. So 10x, 100x it, because even if you don't believe in the Christian God, the universe is conspiring, like everything, 1,000 little things are aligning up just perfectly in order for your desire. to come true. So dream and dream.
Beautiful. And what is your quote for us today?
I'm sure if anybody has been following me for a while, they are probably tired of this. It was my 2022 quote, but now I've circled back to it for 2024 because it's proven true, is that goals are overrated, execution is undervalued. It's one thing to dream, it's one thing to set your goals, but then go and act. Like, go and execute. Don't sit down and continue dreaming. Guys, go work.
Go and do the things. Awesome. And speaking of doing the things, what is your call to action for us to implement after this episode?
Call to action. First of all, go follow me and engage with me.
Yes.
But no, on the real, if there was one thing you could do apart from reading my book, I would say do a personal finance audit. I'm doubling down on that. Do a personal finance audit, whether you're in great shape or you're not sure what shape you're in, or you think you're in really bad shape. Go and do an audit for yourself. In fact, do it with a physical pen if you can. Get a physical pen, get a physical paper. Write down all your assets and their value. Write down all your debts and liabilities, if you have any, and their value, and then net off assets minus liabilities and see what your financial health is like. I'm not really asking you to do this to see whether it's positive or negative. I just want you to become more aware and intentional, because even if it's negative, I started off at negative 249. You can still work your way out of that. So the final number is more so for you to know your financial health, and then you can build all those other dreams and all those other actions on top of that.
Beautiful. You've asked us to follow you and engage with you. How do we connect with you?
Instagram. Okay, so I'm closing off my Facebook because of all the scammer pages. I can't just deal with that anymore. So on Instagram, I'm verified. So I've decided to stick to Instagram and TikTok. Instagram is my primary social media platform. Every so often I go to TikTok and post there. But Instagram, I'm Jane Mazimba. Jane with a Y. Mazimba, there'll be a blue tick there to show, so you follow the verified page. I'm also on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is also quite safe because just by virtue of you signing up, you're verified. So LinkedIn is also a great place. On LinkedIn, I'm focusing more on personal and career development is my focus on LinkedIn. And on Instagram, it's more personal finance and lifestyle. Those are the two pages that you'll find me on.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you found this episode valuable. And if you did, please share it with a friend, family member, or colleague. After all, sharing is caring. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook at The Kind Regards Podcast. Until then, here's wishing you a pleasant and abundant week ahead. Kind regards, Zamiwe.